Chapter 313 of My Hero Academia boasts a couple really of cool things. One, it pretty much confirms that All Might drives the Batmobile. It also gives us a chance of a new Quirk reveal, and it has probably one of the longest names to date for all of My Hero Academia for a chapter name. And even though the chapter did fall short, it was a great one nonetheless. My name is Andrew Nimsger, and today I'm going to be breaking down everything that happened in chapter 313 and giving you a little bit of thoughts and next steps of what may be coming for the rest of the My Hero Academia manga. Let's start off with the chapter recap, and I'll give you my thoughts afterwards, but the chapter is called High Speed Long Range Mobile Cannon. What a name. Say that 3 times fast. I don't think you could. I definitely can. But it starts off with seeing that All Might's car got pretty much unscathed from the first explosion that we saw a couple of chapters ago, and that he's saying that any other car except for Hercules, which is what he's named his Batmobile, would have been destroyed by that explosion. But as he continues driving, he sees 2 villains and shooting these Attack on Titan like flaming spears at his car, and right as they're about to impact, he jumps out. The 2 villains recognize who he is, and one of them starts to panic a little bit, but the other one ends up saying the real All Might died years ago, don't worry about that. But still, All Might stands up, starts talking about how even though he's so weak, that Deku still idolizes him, and the day anything happens to Deku is a day that All Might dies, so they stand aside. And the villains pretty much start trembling. We don't see the end of that confrontation, but it does kind of give the vibe that they're just going to leave All Might alone despite him being in this small Might form. But up in the air, Deku is now moving in a zigzag pattern towards where he saw Lady Nagant originally shooting. But as he's moving forward, all of a sudden a bolt comes from behind, and he's trying to figure out where it's coming when all of a sudden it hit him. That, of course, all for one is going to give Lady Nagant some kind of additional quirk when going after Deku, knowing that he has multiple quirks, trying to make it as even as possible, and that actually by moving towards her and her having the ability to move, it's in Lady Nagant's kind of her advantage, because she's not going to have to think and take in for as many accounts when shooting bullets. She just has to shoot because they're so much closer in range. So it favors Deku's if he gets right on top of her, but if it's still kind of this mid-range, short-range fight, that Lady Nagant is still incredibly deadly despite what you think of a sniper normally being. So at that moment, he realizes that Danger Sense isn't even going to help him because of how close they are, so he drops on the ground and releases a huge smoke screen pretty much at full blast, and N scolds him again, kind of reminding him of how negative it can be of letting out a full smoke screen during battle. But he says that, don't worry, I'm going to do something. And pretty much there's a couple of conversations going on here where he's saying, I'm going to use Third's quirk on the roll. That he hasn't really used it before, that he's not very confident in like some of his other quirks, but this is a time where he needs to do it, and he's got to do it on the fly. So during that, he starts throwing up different things out of the smoke, kind of as decoys. First Gran Torino's scarf, then his backpack, I think his mask even goes up, and Lady Nagant is continuing to shoot at each one of these, saying, you can't hide in the smoke forever. We get a quirk reveal name of the Third's quirk, which is Fa Jin, and right as she's yelling down to him, saying you can't use this as a decoy, Deku is shot straight up and grabs her, saying, I wasn't hiding in the smoke, and looking like he's about to do an X-catapult-like move that we've seen Bakugo do a couple of times before, and that is where the chapter ends. So I guess the first and the biggest thing from this chapter is going to be Fa Jin, which we don't know too much about. Kind of looking around and doing some research on what exactly it means, it seems to be a build-up and sudden explosive release of kinetic energy. So not explosive in the terms of what we commonly think of with Bakugo in terms of actual explosions, but just a quick release of power that he has built up for a sudden increase in speed and power, which pretty much allowed him to get from the ground straight up in a much quicker fashion than probably something like float, or even just using the general all-for-one movement to get up to Lady Nagant, which is why he was able to get on top of her so quickly. I'm sure next chapter there'll be kind of the full reveal after he's taken it down, or pretty much there'll be a panel or two at some point that's going to give a full explanation of what Fa Jin does. So until then, I'm not going to try to dive too deep into it, but nonetheless, it's this explosive release. But the biggest thing that I'm really excited about, that means there's only one quirk left for us to really know what it is, and that's going to be the second quirk. The only quirk we do not have information on. So Fa Jin is, I think, the third oldest quirk we know in all of My Hero outside of the glowing baby and things such as that. It's one of the oldest quirks in My Hero that we've learned to date. Outside of that, All Might driving a Batmobile makes sense. He probably has a shit ton of money, so him having an extremely armored car that he's driving around in a Small Might form does make complete sense. So none of that's really going there. And that moment and his callback to when he was talking to Deku's mom and his kind of moment there was very cool because we haven't got much attention paid to All Might in recent chapters. Obviously, he's been in the background working with Deku and such, but kind of having a moment and trying to understand a little bit more of what All Might's feeling, obviously very concerned for Deku, but still of how he sees himself in comparison to Deku. It was a really cool moment that we haven't got to see too much of. But I don't know if the fight's going to be over here. Obviously, he's about to just yeet Lady Nagant into the top of the skyscraper. I don't know if that's going to take her out. Obviously, she used to be pro hero, so she can probably take a couple of hits, but I think this fight might be nearing the end. Lady Nagant definitely is starting to pick up on that there's something special about Deku because of how many different quirks he has, where I'm sure she probably thought to this point that only All For One was one of the only people that had multiple quirks at a time, besides who he gave them to. So maybe being yeeted in the building, and maybe Deku will run into Overhaul, because maybe this was the same building that he was sitting on top of. I think Overhaul is definitely going to have something to do with the rest of this chapter, and I definitely think Lady Nagant isn't going to fight to the death as some others would, and that this might be a moment when Deku has her pinned to talk and ask questions and try to learn more about why Lady Nagant is hunting and where he can go after Shigaraki and All For One. So my guess would be this fight ends in another chapter or two. I think Lady Nagant isn't going away anywhere quickly, but I just don't think there's going to be a continuation once Deku gets on top of Lady Nagant in terms of a real fight. But again, this just kind of continues this villain hunt arc that's been going on. We're about to learn hopefully more about where Deku at least is going to get a small lead for Shigaraki and All For One. So maybe that'll start being where it is. Or Lady Nagant, as I think I said last week, just kind of comes over the hero side again, works with Hawks. It'd be fun if those had some kind of confrontation because of how afraid Hawks was, and works together to try to take them down. Not exactly sure where it's going to go. There's obviously threads going out there. Obviously, what's going on with the rest of Class 1A? Are we going to get a touch base on them and Bakugo? Or is this going to stay on this Deku-focused chapter with Endeavors and Hawks kind of doing their own things? There's a couple of different ways that we've seen and manga as a whole kind of jump around to a random topic here and there without any kind of lead up to it. So I wouldn't be surprised that if the next chapter was touching on a totally different topic. But nonetheless, it was a great short topic. Chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I cannot wait to learn more about Fa Jin and the second Quirk, which I'm sure will be coming up sooner than we think. But that'll be all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week for chapter 314 of My Hero Academia.